start up here. Hello and welcome to Starting Equipment, Episode 1, a D&D podcast where three nerds pretend to know what they're talking about and even sometimes make sense. My name is Jeff, aka Tum Tum, and I'm one leg of this tripod of hosts. We also have...
Eric, or Erixian 3433, another leg of the tripod.
And even sometimes make sense.
And I'm Matt, aka Moldy617, that third leg holding us up. So let's get into it.
Yeah, so if you guys are familiar with the podcast, and even if you're not, a segment that we like to start with is, what are you guys drinking? So let's start with that first leg of the tripod. Lead us off.
If you followed our D&D session of our campaign, I'm drinking Strongbow. One of my favorite ciders.
Nice. And I've got some Jameson from the distillery, because I was there a few weeks ago, and it is fantastic.
I'll round out the crew with some Johnny Walker Blue Label. I'm also drinking Mountain Dew Baja Blast from Taco Bell. So different ends of the spectrum, but it's all good mixed together in the end.
Absolutely. Just a quick side note, Jeff, I'm not seeing the stream right now.
It's up.
It's up?
Yep. It's on your end.
It's on my end. Oh, now I got it. I just had to refresh, but no, it says, give me something.
Don't worry about
Anyway.
it. We're good.
Well, I'm not going to worry about it. I'll stay out of the chat. You got it. So last week we touched a little in our Player's Handbook character creation segment. We talked about stats. We talked about stats for quite a while, actually, but we never got into the real nitty-gritty of what all of the numbers mean, because for each of these stats, your character will have a numeric value. So we're going to take a little deeper dive into your ability scores and what those scores mean in terms of how strong, how weak, how quick, how slow, how intelligent, how wise you are as a character. If you want to lead us off, Matt, and kind of talk about the range of scores from the bottom to the top and how that affects your modifier, since your ability score really is going to boil down to a modifier that you use in the game.
So we're going to keep this on just the stats and the modifiers for this particular session. We did a little prelude to how you get to these scores in a previous little run through, and we'll probably get back into that in greater detail in a further episode as to how you roll a character, so to speak. That's going to be a whole episode in and of itself. It takes a lot to put into that, and I don't want to go too far into that. But basically, the ability modifier is based on the score that each one of the 6 stats that we went over last time, those being strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, are going to have. Generally speaking, those scores are going to be somewhere between an 8 and an 18. They could be as low as a 3 if you had a really terrible setup, which again we'll go into greater detail later. Basically, that number is the base score of the stat itself, and then each number has a corresponding ability modifier that that goes with it. So if you're talking the highest, 18 would have an ability modifier of a +4, whereas the lowest on average, depending on how you build your guy, for like say you had an 8 is a -1. Those are going to have a direct impact on all rolls and checks that you need to use those abilities for. If you guys want to take that into greater detail, that's kind of a base understanding of that. And there's a table that we can... actually, I'm going to throw it up there because I'm the guy that puts the book in front of the camera. Eric, run with it. I'll drop it in.
Sure. So there's a pretty good look at it. But another way to think about it is that if you take your base stat and you subtract 10 from the number and then divide it by 2. So like Matt said, if you have an 18, that's going to be a +4. So you take your 18 minus 10 to get your 8, divide by 2 to get your 4. I know what you're thinking. Well, wait a second. What if I have a 17? Well, you always round down. So your 17 is going to be a 3.5. You round down to a +3.
Unfortunate.
Unfortunate indeed. But so now you're wondering, okay, well, what might cause me to use this modifier? Well, there's a lot of conditions that might have you roll. So there are checks and there are saves. So a check is essentially when your character is trying to do something, to interact with the world, to interact with a person or an object. You're checking your ability to make action happen, and you would roll a check. So you would roll your d20 and add the ability that corresponds to it. There are also saves. So this is when you're trying to save yourself from a character or object acting on you. There is a minor difference between the two. You might have a proficiency in certain types of saves. So you might have proficiency in dexterity saving throws, which will give you a bonus. At first level, that bonus will be +2 to your saving throws with dexterity. So for instance, let's say that a fireball has been launched at Matt. And a fireball requires you to make a dexterity saving throw against it or take the full brunt of the blast. Let's say Matt has a dexterity score of 16, and he has to beat a 13 to dodge the fireball. So he rolls an 11, but he adds his +3 modifier to it, and successfully dodges most of the fireball's blast and takes half damage. So that's just a quick example of how that might work in the D&D world.
So in terms of this fireball, so when you're saying it's like a 13, so that's pretty much how big it is and how fast it's moving towards the person in relation to these numbers, right? So like the higher numbers, the harder it is to dodge, which, and you're going in terms of imagining what's happening in this game is it's something bigger, faster, it's harder to dodge.
Correct.
In those terms.
Yep. And that spell modifier, that difficulty check, the DC is what we'll refer to it as, comes from whoever is casting the spell. So a higher level magic user will have a higher DC to interact with you. So their spells will be more powerful, harder to dodge.
The spell DC is calculated with a number 8 plus the spellcasting ability modifier plus any proficiency bonus. Now, ability modifier would be, and the proficiency bonus is something that can increase the more powerful they get. That 8 is just a static number that creates the base level to add to. So, for instance, in our game, my spell DC is 13, because of the fact that I have a spellcasting modifier of 3 and a proficiency bonus of 2, plus the base 8 gets you up to 13, for those of you that can do simple arithmetic, and I generally can't, so I write all that down on the sheet.
Correct. So that's a good way to explain it. And as Matt was pointing out, his character in our game is a cleric. So cleric's spellcasting ability is wisdom, whereas if you were a wizard or if you were a wizard, your spellcasting ability would be your intelligence. And if you're a bard, like we're going to talk about today, your spellcasting ability is your charisma.
Just to kind of go over that a little bit more, you can see it on here. My wisdom right there, you can see the base stat at the bottom there, 16. And then if you look back at that table that I showed you, that's where that +3 comes from. Just so you guys get a better understanding, is that when you have your base score and your ability modifier, if you're a caster, that helps you to determine that that spellcasting ability modifier for that save DC. It's not just a random number that we're pulling out of nowhere. Each, as Eric explained, each class has a different stat that it's using for that modifier, and then it's just based off of whatever the modifier of that base score is from that table. It's not magic, just whatever you have for that score, go look at the table, whatever that plus is what your modifier is.
Yeah, so we spent a decent amount of time here talking about magical attacks, but I know some of you are thinking, well, I don't want to play a magic user. I want to be up in your face with a melee weapon. So would one of you guys like to go into how that works? Because you don't have spell save DCs and you don't have saving throws, but you do have
attack bonus
and armor class.
Armor class.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yes. Hang on.
So yeah, Necromancer in the chat. Glad you're hanging out. Hopefully you have some fun and learn some things. If you got any questions, please ask. We will do our best to answer.
All right, so armor class is interesting. There is a formula for certain types of armor class. There is also, we're doing this again, you know I love the book, a pretty crazy table on here that's going to give you what the base armor class for each type of armor is that you're wearing. So I know you can't see that table. We'll throw it up later. Going back to my cleric example, I'm wearing chainmail, which chainmail on this armor class table has got a base score of 16. So that establishes my armor class as being 16. Now, when I get through my whole armor class, then I'll explain what that means. I also carry a shield, and on this table I see shield gives me +2 to my armor class, so my total armor class is 18. What that means is when I am attacked, when the minion or boss or whatever rolls against me, they have to get at least an 18 or higher to hit me, otherwise they miss. So, you know, the big tanky characters that have got really heavy armor on and shields and things like that are a lot harder to hit than, say, a mage or a rogue or something that's either wearing light or no armor whatsoever. Eric, you want to go over how you calculate it if they're not an armor-wearing class?
Sure, I will do that. Just going to jump on Necromancer's question real quick and say that, yeah, there you go. Pen and paper role-playing game. Thanks, Tum Tum. Yeah, so if you're not wearing armor, it does depend. But for the most general case, you're going to take... everyone has a natural ability to dodge attacks or a natural ability to withstand attacks of 10. Then you add your dexterity bonus, which is basically your ability to dodge attacks. So a rogue wearing no armor or a mage wearing no armor might have an AC of 10 plus their dex. Most rogues will have a high dex, so 13 is fairly average for a rogue, whereas a mage or a wizard might not specialize in dexterity as much and may have an armor class as low as 11 if they only have a +1 to their dexterity. And I did want to jump back and touch on something that Matt had said, that yes, characters in heavy armor with shields are difficult to hit because they have a lot of armor to get through. I would disagree that rogues are not hard to hit, though, because rogues have higher dexterity scores, which can increase their evasiveness, which will increase their armor class as well. So armor isn't just your ability to get hit and not take the damage. Armor class is also your ability to dodge out of the way when someone would take a swing at you. As far as calculating something's ability to hit you, it's going to be very much the same way. They're trying to act on you, so they're going to roll with one of their skills. They will have a weapon. If they're a melee character, they will have a sword or a club or an axe. However, if they're a ranged character, they could have a bow or a crossbow or a javelin. And each of these weapons will have a different primary stat. So most of your melee weapons that are large are strength-based weapons. So if I were to try and attack you with a strength-based weapon, I would roll my d20 and add my strength modifier. Now, if I have proficiency with the weapon, so there's two basic classes of weapon. There's simple and martial weapons. Simple represent a weapon that anybody could own and have. A martial weapon is more of a military weapon that requires more training. If you have proficiency in the weapon that you are attacking with, you will gain a bonus. At level 1, that bonus is +2. So let's say I'm a level 1 trying to attack Matt's cleric. He has a AC of 18. Here comes the book. And there you go. That's proficiency bonuses, I believe.
Yeah.
So I am going to try and attack Matt's character. I've got a d20 here, so why not just roll it? I'm attacking with my great axe, and I have +3 strength. I roll an 8. So I add my proficiency with my axe to get me to 10, and then I add my strength to get me to 13. However, the armored dwarf is impervious to my slashes as I just smash off of his shield.
Just to jump back on the proficiency, that's solely based on character level. There's nothing there that's modifying that in strange way. There are some abilities that can give you a duplication of proficiency bonus and things like that, but generally speaking, it's a set number that will increase slowly as you level your character over time.
So a good way to think about proficiency and leveling up is as your character adventures, gains experience, the things that they are good at, they get better at. Is a good way to look at that.
Is there any point in time when your stats go down? Is that even a possibility?
It is a possibility. It usually requires some sort of effect for that to happen. As your general progression, it is possible, but it is rare.
Yeah,
I would say. There are certain things that could cause that to happen. If, for instance, you decided that you were going to stay up for 72 hours straight, your character would start to become exhausted and would suffer penalties for that.
Got it.
Isn't it also true that depending on your dexterity modifier, you could actually have an armor class lower than 10?
Yes.
I mean,
If you had a negative dexterity modifier and you were unarmored, I believe your armor class can be lower than 10.
So, for instance, on my cleric, I actually have a dexterity score of 8, and 8 from that table, which you can find online or we'll throw up at some point, gives you a modifier of -1. So if for some reason I was playing unarmored, then my armor class would be 9. 10 minus 1 being 9, and I'd probably get hit by just about everything that swung at me. So
that is true.
Loving on that shield, loving on that chain. My chain got a little ripped up during our last battle. Come check out our D&D stream Mondays, 7 to 10.
Sure. So Jeff, you asked about your abilities being lowered. There are some magical effects that do that, but what's more common than your actual stats being lowered is disadvantage. So I know we skirted a little bit around the issue in the last episode, but there are circumstances which can cause your character to have advantage or disadvantage on strikes, on saving throws, on spell casting. Matt, would you like to go into what advantage and disadvantage are?
Sure. Advantage and disadvantage are pretty simple. I know we kind of blew past this in the last episode, but I want to make sure that it's well understood, because this is kind of it's a situational thing, but it comes up more often than you probably expect. So it's not something that we want to just blow past and then have you questioning when we're getting to the more advanced combat tactics or things later on. Advantage. So normally when you're doing a check, you're going to roll 1d20 and take that result, add any modifiers that the check requires, which, as we were just talking about, if it was a strength check and you had a +2 to strength, then you would roll your d20, take whatever the result is, add 2 to it, and that would be the final result. When you gain advantage or disadvantage, and there are a number of reasons for doing so, we could go into multiple conditions. I'm sure they'll come up as we move through these episodes. I don't want to go too far in the weeds, so we're just going to stick with the basics. If you gain advantage, you're going to roll a second d20 on that check and take the higher of the two results. So if you roll a 5 and a 17 on a check, you would take that 17 as your roll. Conversely, if you had disadvantage on a check, you would roll 2 d20s, and say you also rolled a 5 and a 17, you would end up taking the 5. Disadvantage is really awful unless you were really lucky and roll super high numbers like some of the people did in our stream yesterday. I saw a 20 and a 16 come out on a disadvantage roll and went, I don't even understand how that's a thing. That's really awesome. But basically the point is, disadvantage, you're probably going to have a decent roll and a not great one, and you have to take the not great one. Advantage is great when your first roll out of the gate is terrible, hoping that the next one's going to be better and you can take the higher number. You're always going to take the higher or lower number. That is what advantage and disadvantage means. But it basically either gives you, in some respect, a higher or lower probability of succeeding at a check because you've been given the advantage or disadvantage to do so.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And like Matt said, we don't want to get too bogged down, but there are multiple conditions which can cause you to gain either one of those two conditions.
Yeah, I feel like you can just think of, in terms of when you're playing, like when you have help doing something, you have an advantage of doing something better, or when you're doing things under duress or doing things, some things that just make things harder, you're going to be given disadvantage. So I mean, just in a general sense, if you think about that, I mean, that's just what kind of determines what has advantage and disadvantage.
You want to relate it back to our last episode talking about the Barbarian, my new love, and a class that I'm currently building a character for that I'm probably never going to be able to use. Their reckless attack skill allows you to have advantage on your melee weapon roll if you use your reckless attack, which basically in that case gives you a higher probability of hitting something, pretty much. Double roll is hopefully one comes out good, even if you're not rolling hot that night. So that's just an example from something we've already talked about. If you want to go back and look at the Barbarian class, you'll see plenty of examples throughout all their skills that we didn't even get into of advantage and disadvantage right in that class.
Right, and I think another big point on that exact skill is that for the entire next turn, you have disadvantage on your saving throws, and enemies that attack you gain advantage. So you're using all of your might to gain an advantage on your swing, but you're sacrificing defense, allowing people to hit you on the next turn. So that's a pretty interesting plus and minus for that skill. Is there anything in this section that you guys want to talk about, further expand upon? I think we covered it pretty well.
Yeah, I think this is going to come up a lot more. I mean, we're talking about, base stats, ability modifiers. I mean, these are the foundations for, the majority of the checks in the game. And I think as we go through more races and classes, now we have a better foundation to build upon. When it says there's a +2 to something, you guys will have a better understanding of, what does that +2 do for me, and how does that make me a little better, a little stronger, or whatnot. So I'm good to move into the race of the week if you want.
I am as well. Jeff?
Yeah, no, sounds good.
All right, let's move that way. So we are sticking to the order that we kind of told you guys last week. We'll be taking a look at the common races, and we'll be moving through alphabetically. So last week we had dwarves. This week we have elves. So do either of you have strong feelings about elves and would like to jump in and start talking?
From a character perspective or a host on the show perspective?
Sure, yeah.
But I don't want to go insider knowledge on people that don't watch our D&D stream. I'm playing a dwarf in our D&D stream. Not a huge fan of the elves. I'm constantly causing hijinks with one of our wizards in particular. So, but I don't know. I think elves are a super versatile class. I love the kind of general. I mean, they live for hundreds and hundreds of years, so they don't get caught up in the little details of life, whereas we as humans kind of get pissed off because you got cut off on the way home, in traffic, and they're like, I don't even understand why you care about that. That's like 1 millisecond of my life that is so unimportant. And it's a very unique perspective that I wonder if I'd be able to really comprehend in a role-playing environment, to say, kind of let go of my normal mindset where one little thing can ruin my day, and look at it as being kind of an infinite speck on my life, and just sort of caring more about the general shape of the world and the changing of nations and things that happened over hundreds of years that we can't even fathom in our 60, 80, 100-year lives. It's really cool to me. And there's a number of races that have that extended life, that dwarves included, that I'm trying to wrap my head around as far as the role playing aspect. That's something that sticks out to me right off the bat.
Yeah,
So.
I don't know, because in our game, just one little neck shot on our own teammates and these elves in our party, they just won't let it go. They're just like, oh man, that traffic sucks, but they really, like I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense. Maybe they're just not role playing right.
To be fair, I think that the character in question is contemplating that long life being cut short. When you've got another 500 years to live and an errant arrow to the neck happens, there is some cause for concern.
I'll agree with that, but I'd like to throw in there that with a healer in the party, he's probably going to be okay, and he doesn't need to focus on the little things, and give Mr. Longbow Shot over there another chance to redeem himself.
Well, let's talk about Mr. Healer. Sorry to jump off topic here for a little bit, but I don't think he had any spell slots left.
He did.
To get back on topic with these elves, I think that they do offer a very unique perspective from a role-playing standpoint, like you guys were bringing up, in that a lot of things just kind of roll off their shoulders. But I think there's also a difficulty in playing them as an adventurer, because most elves, their mindset is, well, I don't really care what that person is doing. He's a human. I'll wait 80 years and he'll die. So the call to adventure has to be strong. There has to be something really pulling them to go out into the world and interact with the world, because in a way they have such a long life that they can just see these things happen and not care.
It is interesting in the fact that if they, want to, if they see something going the way that they don't feel like it should, or they don't want it to, they can really kind of champion a cause. And, if they're strong enough, or they get in with the right group, can, be somewhat of a world shaper, in the sense that, they're pushing their influence onto something and helping to push something in a different direction. And even if it's, say, it is with the humans, which, humans is not a race we've gone over, but I would hope that all of our viewers understand that the human is human and we're all humans. So we'll go over that one eventually, but we bring humans up as an understanding that we hope you know what a human is. And if you don't, awesome that we got aliens listening. I'm super excited about it, and I totally knew you existed. But they get in there, they help the race out, have them do what they want, and then they can watch them all die off and continue to gain the fruits of that labor. But I do think it requires a certain amount of wanderlust, or maybe boredom, on the individual's part, to say, I'm going to go out and do stuff and see what I can do, and mess around with these people that or help these people that do have a shorter life, or are more current short-term goals, just for the sake of maybe I'm even just bored. I don't know. It's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
In terms of, just off of like a physical trait, have you guys ever seen? I just had a quick question. Have you guys ever seen a fat elf?
Not a thing.
Does it not exist? Like, is it impossible?
I don't know if it's impossible. I think they're genetically, predispositioned towards slender frames.
I'm checking the rule book.
I think I need to roll a certain character.
Range from under 5 to over 6 feet tall, and have slender builds.
Slender builds?
Doesn't even give you a weight range. It says only slender builds. So I'm not saying we couldn't homebrew it, and I'd love to see a fat elf. But it would appear that they have kind of written that out specifically, which is kind of interesting, I suppose.
Well, let's jump into the nitty-gritty for a bit. Let's get down to the numbers.
Sure.
So elves, just as they're as it's been implied, they are slender build, which lends them natural grace and dexterity. So they will have an increase in their dexterity score by 2.
What does that mean, Eric, when you're setting a score?
So it's like we were talking about earlier. Let's say your setup, you have a dexterity score of 16 on your character. However, once you decide, okay, well, I am an elf with a 16 dexterity, that actually becomes an 18, which increases your modifier from 3 to 4. So just that little bump can push you up an entire modifier tick point, which can save you in certain situations. Another thing is as Matt said, elves range from 5 to 6 feet. This appearance differs slightly from what most people think in a Tolkien-esque elf, which is above 6 feet tall, usually standing taller than a human. But in this realm, elves range between 5 and 6 feet. They have a speed of 30 feet, which, if you think about it, that's kind of their dexterity. They can move 30 feet during their turn. They have dark vision, similarly to dwarves, so they can see 60 feet in darkness. And they have proficiency in perception. They have keen senses. They also have advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and magic cannot put them to sleep. Another interesting fact about them is they don't need to sleep. Instead, they can meditate for 4 hours and gain the same benefits as someone else sleeping for 8 hours. So what among these things kind of pop out and stick out to you guys?
A quick question: does Link an elf in Zelda? Do we know?
I believe so.
Because if he is, why would Jigglypuff sing in Super Smash Brothers put him to sleep?
That's not a magical effect.
Are you sure? It's just
Jigglypuff is actually a bard.
Jigglypuff's a bard. That's
well,
pretty
if he's
obvious.
a bard, then his voice uses magical properties towards,
No, just finely tuned vocal cords. That's all performance check right there.
Okay.
I always believed Link to be some sort of like a half elf hybrid thing. He seemed a little too.
I mean, I've always pictured him as a wood elf.
Yeah.
He's pretty in touch with nature. He goes into a tree as his first mission. So that's kind of.
For all you out there, we're going to go into the subclasses or the sub races of wood elf and high elf in a second, so you'll understand what he's saying. The thing for me that always sticks out in all these, we've done it with dwarves, now we're doing it with elves, is dark vision. Dark vision with a little bit more explanation, as Eric said, is these are races that have either lived underground or lived in low light conditions all their lives, so they become accustomed to a lower level of light in their general just being. So within 60 feet of you in dim light, you would see everything as if it was regular day, and in darkness as if it was dim light. However, in darkness, you won't be able to see colors. It's more grayscale. But I mean, if you think about, without going too into specifics, just think about the fact that you can see in the dark. And think about the fact that the first word of the thing that we play is dungeons. Any race that has dark vision to me has an immediate advantage in the fact that they don't generally need a torch, or they don't generally need a spell that creates illumination or light or anything like that. They just look around and they see as if they were wandering outside in the sunlight. I love that. I love that race. I would probably have a preference towards playing races that have dark vision.
Yeah,
but
it kind of sucks playing a human.
It's not a must-have, I guess. I mean, I think Jeff can go into how fun it was when we ended up in the Goblin Cave in our adventure as a human, and having to constantly look around for somebody with a torch or a illumination spell. I love dark vision. I think it's a supreme advantage in a lot of instances. Jeff, you want to talk about how fun that cave was for you?
Oh yeah, I mean it's super useful. I mean, it's just in talking in terms of gameplay, when you're trying to sneak around and you're in a dark cave, with no lighting, and you have to carry a torch around. It's like you're not getting around that corner without being able to see people or even shadows without them seeing you or knowing you're coming. So like you're pretty much gung ho going in, and that's not usually the best strategy to go in. So it's definitely really useful. One of the most useful passive traits that are given to classes, I think, in general.
The fun thing about that, two things about that actually, in discussing carrying a torch, that removes a free hand, which already is crippling you from carrying things. And we were in a goblin cave, and goblins have dark vision. So you not only are you walking through like the Macy's Day Parade with your torches blazing through the halls, and everyone can tell you're coming, but they would have been able to see whether you had a torch or not. True. So you're even at a disadvantage, in case somebody figures out a way to put it out, or you drop it in the river, or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, not only did I have to I use a longbow, so both my hands are tied up, so I have to give someone else a torch, and then I have to follow them around just to be able to see, and it's just a hassle. That just give everyone dark vision. Why not? I mean, I could be whatever,
It seems like you guys did not have as much fun in that cave as I did.
Oh, I love that cave. I had no problem with it, other than the fact that my character, dwarf, we were just talking about fat elves. There are only fat dwarves, so I don't do the whole sneaky thing all that well.
Stout?
Fat. My particular dwarf is a fatty. So it's an unfortunate thing for me, I guess, in the fact that I have dark vision, so I could be sneaky in a dark situation if I wasn't clinking chainmail through the shadows, trying to sneak up on something. This is one thing that we'll probably get into in a, I would guess, much later episode is thinking about race class combinations that you want to put together. Maybe not. Maybe it'll be sooner, than that. But the thing you think about there is, dwarf, stout. If he doesn't have a super high dexterity, or you're playing him with a character that, can't stealth very well. In the case of the dark vision thing, it may not be as helpful to you as you'd hope. Whereas, if you were playing it with another class, I mean, you think of any of the sneaky classes from any games you've ever played, things like rogues and thieves and things like that. You can sneak up in the middle of the night, see like it's plain as day, and the people around you can't. I mean, you're just robbing people blind, and they have no idea what's going on. So that's always an interesting. I've thought about the dark vision, especially with an elf being so graceful and nimble. They're on you, and you're either dead or penniless before you know what happened.
Well, I'm going to jump in and say one of my the thing that I find most interesting. Sure, dark vision is always helpful. I think you can get away with carrying a torch if you find a creative, fun way to do it. Sure, it gives you a disadvantage that first round of combat. You have to put the torch down, or you have to throw the torch, or whatever you do. But I think that the trance, the fact that they don't have to sleep for a full 8 hours, is extremely beneficial, because they have 4 extra hours to do with what they want during the night. So whether that 4 hours is spent researching or keeping watch or whatever, they have a full rest on 4 hours of sleep. So they take half the time as anybody else to get a full rest, and they're useful for more time during the day. Now, I know that in our current adventure, we haven't had any time crunches, like, we have to go do this thing as quick as possible. So that hasn't come into a big effect. But it did allow Kaylin, in our most recent playthrough, to identify a couple of items that she had been carrying with her.
She's an elf wizard, by the way, if you're not watching our stream.
That I should have pointed that out. Thank you. So it allowed her extra time during the night while the rest of you were sleeping off your drinking for the evening. And she was able to figure out what a weapon and an item did for her. I think we will probably talk about that weapon and that item later in this episode. So stick around if you're interested.
I have an interesting question to that. If you ran a party of all elves,
Okay.
Mind blown already, but stick with me on this. You're saying that a trance is 4 hours when a normal amount of sleep required to rejuvenate yourself, it would be 8. Would you effectively be able to add 4 hours to every day if your entire party was made up of elves?
Yeah. I mean, if you were to sleep in places that were completely safe and all of you could sleep at the same time, absolutely. You would add 4 hours to your adventuring day.
So there, all you alpha types out there min-maxing your parties, go all elf, and you got a 20-hour day.
Boom.
You guys want to get into the sub races a little bit? I mean, there's some pretty distinct differences here that I think play well to certain classes, and even just play well to a certain role-playing feel.
I was just about to suggest that.
So.
Look at you guys, so cute.
Oh.
How about this? There are 3 sub races. So Matt, why don't you take high elves? I'll take dark elves, and Jeff, you can do wood elves.
Gotta give me the big uppity noble ones.
Well, you are a bit big and uppity.
Dang it, you got me. High elves. There's a whole big exposition here about where the high elves come from. I can go through this in a lot greater detail. Suffice it to say, it's one of the sub-races of the elf class. I think from a role-playing perspective, if you want to really read through this and get into, where they come from, you're talking about Gray Elves and Valley Elves from the Greyhawk setting, the Sylvan Estuary from the Dragonlance setting. I think those are really specific to what particular world you're playing in, and I don't think we need to spend too much time in that. I think you're just going to need to know which one you're playing in, and therefore who you come from. Where these really differ and where it gets interesting is in what they get as far as proficiencies and abilities in the different sub-races. So if you're playing a high elf, you get an extra ability score increase on your intelligence by 1 point. As we went over in a previous episode, intelligence is probably one of the most important skills for wizard class. It's used for their spellcasting abilities and things like that. Doesn't mean you have to be a wizard if you're a high elf, but it never hurts to have that +1, as we went over. +1 can, possibly take your ability modifier. If you got an odd number, remember, round down is boo, and we hate that because we lose that plus. You roll a 17 on your intelligence, you get that +1. That pushes you up 1 extra modifier. From that. And which just makes you stronger overall. You have weapon training, which gives you proficiencies with long and short swords and long and short bows. So that gives some interesting playability to different classes if you wanted to play either a melee or a ranged, class of character. The interesting thing about the high elf that I really love, and the reason why I kind of want to play one as a class that it doesn't make sense to have this ability for, is you will gain a cantrip of your choice from the wizard spell list, and intelligence is going to be your spellcasting ability for it.
What is a cantrip?
So that was a whole lot of things we haven't gone over, and Jeff, I appreciate you slowing me down because you knew I'd blow right past it. Cantrips for
level 0.
Cantrips for spellcasters are considered to be basically a level 0 spell, and a cantrip is something that you've basically memorized by rote that you can use over and over and over again. So real quick, we haven't gone into a whole lot of spellcasting or spellcasters yet. We'll probably get to this eventually. Spellcasters have spell slots for the different spells. There are spell levels 1 through 9, and you will gain, as you level up, a certain amount of spell slots that you're able to use for each level. Once you've expended these spell slots, you will only gain them back through resting. Whereas a cantrip, being a spell level 0, effectively, can just be cast over and over and over again, and you never lose that spell. The thing that I think is crazy about this is the fact that you could be playing a complete melee fighter class that just happens to have a wizard spell that you can cast at will whenever you want. I'll while we're going into the other ones, I'll see if I can pick 2 or 3 of my favorites that we might throw in there as a modifier. But That just seems awesome. On top of that, being a high elf, you're kind of well learned, and things like that. So you are able to speak, read, and write one extra language of your choice. That can be super helpful and also super situational in the fact that if you're in a party with a race that you don't speak their native language. I mean, generally you all speak common, but I could also pick Dwarvish as a third race so that. Me and my dwarf buddy can hang out and talk about everybody else behind their back, and nobody would know what we were saying. So that's pretty much it for the high elf. Like I said, I'll throw out a couple of cantrips after we go through a couple more of these once we start talking about play testing these guys a little bit. But it's that's by far and away the thing that stands out to me as something that could be really cool.
I agree. I think having a cantrip as a non-casting class is very interesting. You can pick something as a utility spell, or you can pick a damage spell, which gives you a ranged attack if you're mostly a melee character. I think that's a really cool ability. I also, from a DM standpoint, I love extra languages. It's just something that's very interesting because I like to make puzzles in different languages that make my players try to solve something. A riddle written in abyssal or some such thing is difficult to solve and is fun for people to try and figure out.
So throwing up the list of the wizard cantrips right there. As you can see, there's a ton of them to pick from. Not going to go through all of them right now. We'll do spell casting on a later episode, but it's just, as Eric said, you're throwing out either an offensive ability that, may not make sense at all normally for your particular class, but you have it because of your sub race, or something that's just super beneficial to the party in general that can help to solve traps or other problems that you run into. Jeff, you want to hit that wood elf for us?
Yeah. So what else? Just from overview of the player's handbook and just general knowledge, what else? I think when you think of elves in general, that what else are what comes to people's minds first? In terms of most fantasy settings in movies, TV, wood elves are what's depicted. I think the highest percentage. High elves then behind that. But when you think of wood elves, you think good in the trees. They generally reside in forest foliage, things like that. Definitely native to the forest. What else? They're also known by a few other things. Wild elves, green elves, or forest elves, just because that's generally where they reside. So in terms of specific for the class, what they do, they get an increase in their wisdom. So their wisdom score gets increased by 1. So all wood elves get their wisdom score increased by 1, which makes sense because, like you said, they're used to living in the forest. You're used to using just general knowledge of their surroundings. If you listen to our last episode, wisdom usually comes into effect when you're using things and or objects around you in certain ways to do certain spells and or actions. And wood elves have a really keen sense of what's around them and what's going on. So I think that's what benefits them the most. They also have, as well as the high elves, they have elf weapon training, which the general elf items of longsword, short bow, and longbow, they're proficient in. So they get the bonuses from that when using those weapons. They're also light on their feet. They're very nimble. They're used to traveling through rough terrain since being in the forest, things like bushes, trees, branches. So they have fleet of foot, which gives them a movement speed of 35, which is well above the normal speed. Last thing they get is Mask of the Wild, which again, just joining the fact of living in the trees and things like that. They're used to using what's around them to blend in, to hide, to be generally stealthy.
I'm going to jump in real quick, and for Legendary that just jumped in, we're talking about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. Hopefully you enjoy the stream. If you like it, stick around, ask questions. Go on, Jeff.
Yeah. So, and one thing I get it because, like I said, Mark of the Wild, they're good at blending in, they're good at hiding, things like that. They're good at using what's around them to make themselves hidden. But just to read it from the player's handbook, you can attempt to hide even when you're only lightly obscured by foliage, heavy rain, falling snow, mist, or other natural phenomena. To me, I don't really like how can one hide in snow from during a snowstorm?
So I think that's actually a really interesting ability in that they can hide, when it's heavy rain. So I would say that this ability is quite difficult, and there's probably a range at which it wouldn't work anymore. So heavy snowfall only obscures your vision probably 60 feet plus out. And that's how, as a DM, I would handle that. Most of the time, it's impossible to hide from a character that can see you. So if a character can see you, you cannot hide from them. But let's say you're 60 feet out, and maybe a normal character would cast a large shadow walking through the snowstorm. But an elf who's accustomed to living in nature might be able to hide in that, or hide in rain, or hide in small bushes.
So if you're seen, so another person sees you, it starts raining super hard, then you're within 60 feet, they can see you, they clearly see you, or 50 feet. If you move out of range, could you then potentially hide and completely gone?
I wouldn't say completely gone. They would know the direction that you went away from them, right?
Okay.
But they wouldn't know exactly where you were. So if they were trying to make a ranged attack on you, they would have disadvantage because they can't technically see you. They would just know the general direction that you are in.
Gotcha. So out of the abilities that the Wood Elves have, what do you guys think is the most useful?
Personally, from my standpoint, I think that Fleet of Foot is the best ability that they have. They have increased speed, which allows them to either engage at a faster rate or disengage at a faster rate. If you're playing a character that is ranged, you can get away from the combat and still fire. If you're playing a melee character, you can get up to the enemies faster. I think it's a huge advantage.
Gotcha. What do you think, Matt?
I love the idea that you can hide in plain sight. I just, I think the combination for me of Fleet of Foot and the ability to hide in basically light cover, I guess, is what you're kind of coming. You're talking heavy falling snow, heavy rain, light foliage, things like that. That you're not talking they walked behind a brick wall and now they disappeared. You're saying there's something partially obscuring someone's view. And they, as Eric has explained, they're not gone. It's not like they just poofed and they don't have an idea of where you disappeared to. But disadvantage on an attack, as we explained disadvantage earlier, is not fun and makes it a lot, more likely that they're going to miss you. Well, I shouldn't say a lot, but more likely in general that they're going to miss you. And the Fleet of Foot thing, to me, if things get rough and you need to get out of there and it's pouring down rain, 35 feet is a pretty fast base speed in the fact that you may be able to just outpace whoever's chasing you. And if you get far enough away or you hit that light foliage or you're still in a snowstorm or whatever, poof, now they're throwing disadvantaged attack rolls at you as you're just booking it for the hills. That seemed awesome for me in the holy crud, my party went down and I need to get out of here and figure out a way to bring in reinforcements to get them back. Or, if you find yourself in a place alone that you really shouldn't be, we split the party yesterday.
You guys would never split the party, right?
not only do you never split the party, but you always split the party into 3 groups instead of just 2, which was just so awesome for our DM to deal with. And mad props to Eric for playing like 57 NPCs because we went everywhere at once. The combination to me seems almost gives me a little bit more sense that I could maybe try to venture off by myself a little bit in the right conditions and have just a slight advantage to making it out of there alive more so than somebody else.
Yes. So I think with all the abilities that I mentioned that the Wood Elf has, to me, out of all the subclasses, which we haven't talked about Dark Elf yet, or subrace, I feel like it's not the most powerful abilities that they have, but it has the most synergy out of all of them, that they all kind of work well together in terms of utilizing, in certain situations, of course, but I feel like it has the best synergy between all the abilities to work well together in comparison to the other sub-races.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think it's a very cool combination.
So next, I think we have, unless you guys have something else to say about Wood Elves, we have Dark Elves coming up.
Right, so Dark Elves, or as they're commonly referred to as Drow, play a little differently. Most elves are fair-skinned if you're a high elf, or sort of tan-skinned because you're outside all the time if you're a wood elf. Drow have dark skin. They live underground, very similar to something like a dwarf. Most of their time is spent underground, but they live in a matriarchal society. So men are kind of looked down on as the women actually have all the power. So I think that's an interesting way to role play the character just from the get-go. But there's still a subclass of elves, or subrace, sorry. So if you jump into the sort of nitty-gritty, they increase their charisma by 1. So this gives them ability increase when they're talking to people or when they're trying to get their way, if they're trying to persuade someone or deceive someone. They also have superior dark vision. Matt, I know you'll love this. Their dark vision functions instead of at a 60-foot radius at 120 feet.
Dang.
But as a trade-off, they have sunlight sensitivity. And what that means is you have a disadvantage on attack rolls and wisdom perception checks while in direct sunlight.
A vampire.
However, they have increased magical abilities. So they know the dancing lights cantrip. At 3rd level, they learn Fairy Fire, and at 5th level, they can learn to cast Darkness. So they have some of the traits of the High Elves. They're allowed to learn all these very interesting magical effects, but they can learn more, but they have greater disadvantages. They also have Drow weapon training, which is slightly different than Elven weapon training. They have proficiencies with rapiers, short swords, and hand crossbows. So you have 1 less weapon, but they're more unique weapons, and I think that adds a bit of flair to the subrace. What do you guys think is, the most interesting? I'll toss the softball to Matt first.
Oh, dark vision, that's my jam. 120 feet means I can basically see across the entire dungeon. No big deal. Probably can't cast anything that far, but hey, I can tell what's going on the opposite side. Drow's an interesting subrace to me. I don't know. It's so situationally. You can't do things in direct sunlight. I mean, we spend a lot of time in the open world adventure. In the current one, we're at least in outside. I think it would play real well for maybe an underground adventure, things like that, or something where you're constantly in a dark vision situation. But I definitely love the other two a lot more than this one. If I could pull that superior dark vision onto, say, a wood elf and then turn him into a druid, that'd be pretty much me for the rest of always.
Sure. Jeff?
Yeah. to me, it's a dark elf. It would be the most interesting but least sub race that I would want to play personally, just for my take. I mean, it definitely is interesting because you definitely have to work around a few things, but you definitely get a good amount of bonuses to offset it. Um, just in my mind, the best thing. I mean, like yeah, I just because being a human, and I mean, I guess half of our adventures so far, or close to it, at least time wise, have been in a cave, and the increased dark vision would just be phenomenal. Like I'm sure most depending on it's all campaign depending on what you're doing and things like that. Um, but I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting, and I think that it's sort of DM dependent on what they want to throw at you. But from my standpoint, if we had a drow in our party, I think that I'd like to send them into areas where dark vision is helpful, just to kind of bring everything together.
Yeah.
True.
Does anybody have any quick literary examples that they want to touch on before we jump forward to our class of the week? I mean, does anybody want to talk about Legolas at all?
I think we shot Legolas, Hawkeye, etc. to death. Now, granted, Hawkeye is a human, but exhibits high dexterity, which a lot of times is associated with the elves.
I mean, outside of the pointy ears, he's a freaking elf.
Yeah, pretty much. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Outside of the pointy ears, he's kind of Legolas, right?
Yeah,
we might have beat that one.
He's Legolas in purple and black.
Might have beat that one to death in the last episode.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's just sort of an embodiment. And Legolas is a high elf, I believe, and that he comes from that sort of royal heritage. He's tall, proper, yet exhibits extreme dexterity and ability to use bows. And we kind of touched on Link, and so that he might be a wood elf, but I don't think there's a good example in most, popular culture for a drow, and I think that might be the hardest to get into character with. There's not a lot of good examples, and it's hard to. Well, I mean, I guess you could just look towards vampires, as Matt said. That might be a good way to look at it.
What where do you guys know? I know it doesn't really state, but why drow? Why is it called drow? Where did that come from?
I'm not actually sure, but I'll try to look into that and have something better for next week to say about it.
Yeah, because in this player's handbook is the first time I've heard. I mean, I've seen dark elves in video games, things like that, but I've never heard drow before, and I'm just interested to see lore-wise where's that come from, or things like that.
Well, the interesting thing about the drow too is the fact that they're generally considered evil, I believe, or at least a lot of them are played as evil. They're following the goddess Lolth, which we're not going into goddesses right now or alignments, but that's the interesting difference for me between the drow and the other two is the fact that you're kind of playing the opposite side of the spectrum. Now, I know for any of you out there that are not beginners to D&D, there is a incredibly well-known example of a good drow, and I can't think of the name off the top of my head.
Drizzt.
Thank you. Other than that, that's an interesting thing for me too. It would make it. We'll go into alignments eventually. Also, we're kind of sidestepping things like that because that gets into a whole other conversation. But it makes drow hard to play in an adventure with a lot of good characters, and a lot of time your DM will not allow you to play an evil character, just because of the fact that there's such a clash there in their general mindset going into everything.
And I'll just come in with sort of a DM's perspective on that. It is difficult to have good and evil characters exist in the same party because they don't really want the same things. It is certainly possible, but very difficult. And I think it's almost more stressing on the players than the DM to figure out, okay, how do these two characters get along enough that they don't, like, how would a paladin and an evil warlock get together long enough to not just kill each other? And that's an interesting role playing, predicament. But
True.
I think we've drifted a little far away from our elves, so let's jump into our class that we want to talk about, and that is the bard. Now the bard is the bard is difficult to talk about because it can be so very many things. The bard is really a jack of all trades, in that they can really do anything. They can be spellcasters. They can be melee attackers, duelists. They can be ranged attackers. And in fact, one of their class features is called Jack of all trades. So it's a very interesting class, and one that's difficult to talk about since it kind of encompasses a lot of different classes. But we'll do our best here. And I'll just jump into the nitty gritty real quick because that's what I like to do. I like numbers. I like to see how things work.
Real quick. I just, in terms of what type of bards there are, I think if you're thinking of the most true, the way they perceive, at least in this game and in a lot of other media, I think bards in terms are just, you can go through all of it, but if you're going true bard, going strict for what they are, I think they're just a true support class. Just playing music, making people feel good and feel better and perform better because they feel good. And but like you said, they can literally do anything if you want them to, which is pretty cool. But in general terms, I feel like just general support for the whole party is, and not just in terms of healing, but benefits across the board, I think is their most basic form, I guess you could say.
Sure, I would agree with that.
So numbers. Let's hear numbers.
Yeah, all right. So the bard has a 1d8 hit die, which means we kind of talked about this with the barbarian. That's a representation of how much health you will gain per level. So every time you level up, you'll roll your hit die, and that's how much you will add to your maximum hit points, and add your Constitution modifier. They start out with 8 hit points plus your Constitution modifier. So since we talked about modifiers, if your Constitution was 12, you would have a modifier of +1, so you would start with 9 hit points. They're proficient in light armor, simple weapons, hand crossbows, long swords, rapiers, and short swords. They are proficient in 3 musical instruments of your choice. So choose something outlandish. Lute is overdone.
Recorder.
Drum set.
Do you have a portable drum set that you take with you into battle?
Freaking Donkey Kong does it. Why can't the freaking board?
Well, like the bass drum, and then you got the cymbals between your knees and everything. That's the one-man band.
Perfect. I love it.
I was definitely thinking like recorder or ocarina.
Why not both, right?
You get back to Zelda.
You have proficiency in dexterity and charisma saving throws, and you can choose any 3 skills to have proficiency in, which really signifies their jack of all tradesness. You can just pick whatever your party doesn't have. You can fill in the roles that your party doesn't gain. They use charisma as their casting modifier, and they can learn. They are a spellcasting class, so they're similar to wizards and warlocks and those sorts of things, in that they can actually have a 9th level spell at high levels. So just to kind of touch on that, your kind of pseudo casters will only get up to 5th level spells, whereas your full casters will gain 9th level spells. And that's kind of an important distinction between kind of half casters and full casters.
For all you out there, when he says level, for now, just take that as bigger number, more powerful. Whether in terms of damage, support, whatnot. We can hit that in a lot more detail later on.
Sure. So that's really the numbers aspect of it. I won't get into how many spell slots and things of that nature. It kind of just drags us through. So let's stick to some of the higher level stuff, and go with Bardic Inspiration, which I really think. Well, there you go. You have the book. You can see a screenshot. You have Bardic Inspiration, which really defines the class. It allows you to stir other people to action, to boost them. So you can find creatures other than yourself within 60 feet of you to gain a d6 inspiration die that they can use on one of their checks within the next 10 minutes, which is extremely useful in battle because you can encourage someone to make better attacks or to do a skill check better. It's just an interesting class feature. You also gain Jack of all trades, as I mentioned earlier, which you can add for sure. You can add half of your proficiency bonus rounded down to any ability check that you make that doesn't have your proficiency bonus. So even if you aren't proficient in a skill, you still gain part of your proficiency bonus to that skill, which is incredible. At third level, you can pick a bardic college. Now there are colleges of lore and valor. There's also some homebrewed ones that we won't really get into, Unearthed Arcana and things like that. But just know that College of Lore is you know something about almost everything. And College of Valor is daring bards who keep alive the memory of great heroes of the past. So that's something to kind of keep in mind when you're thinking about playing a bard. You've also got Font of Inspiration, so you are able to inspire people with your bardic inspiration more often. And then eventually you can get to your superior inspiration. So when you would enter combat and have no inspiration to give, you automatically gain an additional point of inspiration. Do any of you want to highlight any of the skills that I didn't touch on, or talk about any of the things that you find interesting in the class? I feel like, Jeff, you'll have a lot to say here.
I mean, most important part about a bard, and above all else, there's nothing else more important. If you're gonna play a bard, and you're not gonna actually sing or perform your songs to do your spells and or cantrips, you just need to not play a bard. Because that's the most important thing. I mean, I'm super excited. Like, we just started playing, and I went through the player's handbook and going through all the bard and just the crazy variety that the bards have, and just how much fun you can have with the class, because you can like you said, you can do they're jack of all trades. You can do whatever you want, which to me, the way I play games, it's the most fun. And you can be serious, you can be funny, you could be impressive, you can do anything. The amount of abilities that you can do, you can go across the spell sheet and just literally in certain ways you can pick whatever you want to do and do it. So I mean, I'm super excited to eventually be able to play a bard. That's my number one thing for this game. I can't wait.
I'm gonna go into this with the numbers thing, min-maxing skills. The bard, to me, seems like just the most broken class you've ever heard of in your entire life, guys. Yeah. We talked proficiencies earlier in this episode, and I showed you that little screenshot. We can throw that up, or you can find it all over the internet. Just look for the proficiency plus table for 5e. Starting out as a +2, by the time you hit a level 20 character, you're at a +6. Base bard, let's go back to level 1. You get 3 skills that have proficiency in them. So you're throwing a 2 on top of whatever your modifiers are to those skills to begin with. You gain 1 level, just 1. You hit 2nd level character. you can now add half your proficiency bonus rounded down to everything else. So now you're adding 1 for now and eventually 3 at max level to every single skill you have, which in some cases, if you have a really poor base score and it's a negative, you may actually move it positive just with the Jack of all trades skill. Wait, now we're level 3. We're still super noob. You can even hit level 3 in the starting adventure if you were allowed to play a bard and didn't play a pre-made character. You gain expertise, one of the ones that I don't think Eric mentioned. That allows you to double your proficiency bonus in 2 skills you're already proficient in. So now we're at +4. You hit level 10, you can pick 2 more to gain a double benefit. Bard, in my opinion, gives you the ability to do everything pretty well. And not many other classes have this. The skill right there says Jack of all trades. But the cool thing for me, and back to Jeff's comment right at the beginning of this discussion, is they're a support class in all senses of the word, and they can do everything a little bit better as they get stronger than probably most other people can, unless they've specialized in certain things here and there. But just the doubles to we talked earlier about how does your proficiency bonus change outside of just what the base character level is. Expertise is a great example of that. Doubles your proficiency bonus. That is unique to this class. That the other classes don't have. That to me is just dumbfounding that, I'm throwing pluses all over the place to where my character sheet would look like a tornado hit it, just fixing all of the pencils and everything like that as I'm leveling this guy up, and it just seems so awesome to me. Then you take the 2 colleges and you go lore. Gives you the ability to run spells from other spell books that, now I'm casting wizard spells as a bard while I'm playing my guitar and throwing Ray of Frost at you. Or I go Valor, and I become proficient with shields and martial weapons, and I'm hitting you in the face with my guitar, or a sword. Why not? It's just, the class is so cool because we could have 5 bards in a party and play them completely differently. And it would just, I don't know, I love it. I absolutely love it.
So is a guitar a simple or a martial weapon? I'm confused.
What country was it made in? Of what quality and at what price point?
Depends how sharp the edges are.
Fair enough.
Are the strings easily removable too? Like, can you use the strings in combat?
Jeff and I discussed off air that either you pull the headstock out and there's a sword inside, or possibly you use the strings as a bowstring for firing arrows. Could be fun. The other thing I want to mention real quick in the College of Valor, your bardic inspiration actually allows them to use the die on a damage roll and not just on attack rolls or spell save DCs and things like that, to where you're basically making people hit harder. It's just the support there. I don't ever want to run a campaign without a bard, because I feel like without them you're just missing out on opportunities for making you all stronger, better players. And I'm really excited for Jeff to put his together, because I know it's going to be crazy, and I just can't wait.
Yeah, in terms of putting my bard together, I think one of the guaranteed, so you get to pick a starting cantrip like we mentioned, which is just a spell that you can just pretty much use at will. One of my favorite things that I've ever seen is called Vicious Mockery. It just seems perfect, because just to read from the book, from the player's handbook, in a range of 60 feet, so anyone within 60 feet, you can unleash a string of insults laced with subtle enchantments as a creature you can see within range. So if they can hear you, they don't even need to understand you, and you can do 1d4 damage to them just by insulting their face. And it's phenomenal, and I can't wait. I'm so excited.
I mean, I don't have a lot to add. I think you guys really nailed it.
I just, like I said, you run a Valor Bard, you run a Lore Bard, and you run just modifications of what spells that they've picked, and I mean, you can just have completely different people.
Yep.
It's like they're not even playing the same, they don't even look the same, they don't feel the same. If you pick a different race, they completely don't even act the same, and it it's awesome. I think it's one of the most versatile classes there is.
Do you feel like you could do that and be successful at higher levels in terms of doing certain, because there are jack of all trades, they're not going to be the best at doing certain things. They're going to be able to do certain things that other classes can't do, but do you think they're going to be able to succeed in the things they need to succeed in, especially at higher levels, and when they are able to do those things to the point where you don't need someone specialized in it?
No.
Correct. I don't think at higher levels you'd have a very successful campaign. I think that Jack of all trades, master of none is a great saying at this point. Yes, bards gain a lot of advantages, even in things that they're not trained in, but they aren't specialized enough to where they can really do the high-level things that other characters can.
I'd love to run a 3-4-5 bard party in a one-shot campaign. For those who don't know what that is, it's basically a 1, maybe 2 session kind of, you sort of have one quest, go out, complete a dungeon, and you're done sort of thing. Or run them on a character level 1 through 5 campaign where you're not getting in huge nasties, and just see how far you make it. I think it would be a fun thing to do, not unlike we were talking earlier about, let's run a campaign with all elves. That's probably not going to work super great in, when you're fighting multiple dragons and things like that. But, that's kind of what keeps D&D, infinitely replayable and interesting, is the fact that you can throw a one-shot out there and say, everybody has to roll a bard, and I'm the DM, so you have to be a bard.
All elf bards.
Staying up all night.
And we got to figure it out. And it's just, and it may turn out as a disaster, or it might be the most fun that you've ever had, and you're talking about it for the next 10 years. So... But no, I agree with Eric. I think if you're playing 15th, 20th level characters, they aren't strong enough in the places they need to be to really be able to handle what you're coming up against at that point.
I'd agree. I just kind of wanted to state it just because it seemed like the way me and you and Eric are talking about it, it's like they're really overpowered and broken, blah, blah, blah. But in the long stream, they're really good at what they are, but they're not perfect. They're not going to be broken. They're just going to be very useful, I feel.
I would agree with that. Anything else you guys want to talk about while we're on the topic of bards?
Hashtag Jeff Bard.
Hashtag Jeff Bard.
Hashtag Jeff.
Can't wait.
All right. Well, I think we have maybe just a little bit of time that we can talk about the campaign session that we had last night. If you guys are up for it. So for any of you in the chat, we play a session. We're running through the starter set, Lost Minds of Phandelver, every Monday night, starting at 7 Central.
Jeff and I wish it was every night.
I'd do it.
Listen, I wish it was every night as well, but, other things do come up. Anyway, I want to kind of toss it out to you guys. I'm DMing the session, so it's good to get questions from you guys to say, well, why did that character act that way, or how did you feel about when I did this thing, or how can this certain situation be better? And I'll kind of toss out some specific questions, but if you guys have anything that you want to talk about, let's hit those first.
So one part of our adventure yesterday, there was a lot of role-playing involved, going from places to places, investigating, trying to figure out where we need to go next. There was a point where we finally all got back together except for one of our party members who wasn't there. But then we were ambushed by at the time two red brands, but they were evil guys, I guess. I don't know what you want to call them.
Red brands, yeah.
2 red brands. Was that planned? Was that thrown in there just to spice up, put a little battle in their time? What did you as a DM did you think about beforehand, where you're like, I'm gonna have these guys run into these guys at this certain time? What were you thinking?
So the red brand encounter was a planned event. I knew the entire night that you guys were going to run into them at some point. I didn't know how that was going to happen, and I let the session kind of organically find that spot. And I think when you all got back together was a really good time to throw it at you.
I agree.
I think that the ambush that the Red Brands were putting on would have definitely taken out two of your members. You know, if because let's jump back a little bit. You guys did split the party, 2, 2, and 2. Fantastic. Thanks, guys. I had to play like 10 different people and just switch between them over and over and over again. It was fantastic. But, however, you know, I think if any two of you would have encountered 3 or 4 Red Brands, they would have taken you out. So I was sort of waiting, but I was putting the pressure on. So at each location that you guys went to, there was the imminent threat of Red Brands being around. It's not like they don't have an active presence in the city. They're clearly moving around. They're checking on certain things. All right, Pittner, I see you. But the Red Brands are moving around. They are doing things in the city, and they have noticed your presence there. So they're checking up on you. And when that encounter happens is based on your ability to avoid confrontation throughout the night, or the day, I guess. And you guys did avoid, for the most part, confrontations. You know, Sigurd and Varian, you guys got out of the house before they came at you. Cyrus was able to avoid just walking into a complete ambush, which I'm glad she did not walk into, and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing for me is, you know, I do a lot of reading about D&D. I don't bring a lot of it. We try to add some of it to the stream, but you know, some of it is things that we haven't covered topics of yet, and don't want to, you know, create too much complexity in what we're talking about. But you know, our party has not gelled yet or coalesced into a like-minded group, and I think in town that's probably going to be less so than if we're out on an adventure. But my concern is the fact that we have a lot of people in the group right now that are just like, well, this is what I want to do, and if nobody wants to come, I'm just going to go anyways, and wander off by themselves. And that's a really, you know what? Hey, we're on starting equipment. We're talking about the basics to playing a D&D character. The worst idea in the entire world in Dungeons and Dragons is to wander off by yourself, because the DM, without even trying to, can kill you really easily if you happen upon something that you're not supposed to find by yourself. And there's, you know, little to nothing they can do other than, you know, flubbing rolls for oh so long to try to keep you alive at that point. So, you know, I think the town thing is interesting, but I think we have, I think that's kind of why it led to Eric having to play so many different characters all at once, because of the fact that some of us wanted to go do one thing, some of us wanted to go do another thing, and some of us wanted to go do another thing. And while we're in town and we have nowhere to be, you know, we could all just go with each other and do this thing and then that thing and then that thing. Everyone's prioritizing and going off in different directions. And I just think that we're going to need to be careful with that the further we get into this adventure, or people are going to die and we're going to lose characters, you know, straight up. And that's the one thing that I noticed. You know, it also makes it difficult now because we have run into multiple different, call them quest givers, people that are looking for us to do things. And so now, you know, each group of 2 has sort of run into a guy that said, hey, can you help me with this? And we said, well, I'll talk to the party and see what they say. But now, you know, we have to come back together again and say, hey, I heard about this thing. And they say, well, I heard about this thing. And then we're still going to have to make a decision on where we're all going to go, because if we continue to split up, I don't think there's going to be 6 players, you know, pretty quickly there, especially with, you know, I mean, that last fight was rough. We took some serious damage. Luckily, we had a couple of, you know, blessings put on us for some extra hit points and things like that, which we'll go into temporary hit points on a later episode. But, you know, it just, it was rough, and they hit like a truck. And, you know, if it had been where Varian and I, me, Sigurd, not me, Matt, had gotten caught infiltrating that house, we might not have made it back out of there. And because we had said we were going to meet up hours later, we might have been dead by the time they got over there. So it's a little concerning to me. And I don't know, if that's going to get better or if we're just going to have to work at that or if that's just always going to be a thing we're going to have to deal with. But, that was an interesting thing that I saw out of that. So,
yeah, I think.
I also found a coloring book, but I'll go into that later.
Yeah, in terms of splitting the party, for me, it didn't. So I think it's okay to split the party, not in our situation, because to me, I didn't really understand how. I knew that there was a bunch of thieves. The Red Brands are thieves. I knew they were not good people, but I also didn't feel like they were directly out for our party going through this. And that's why I was like, it's whatever, we can split up. I didn't even think about it. And I thought it was okay. So I think if we're going to a town and there's no, threats, possible threats, I feel like splitting the party could be a good thing, could be a time saver, could be, things that could be beneficial in terms of going to a town. And I thought it would be fine because, like I said, I didn't think the Red Brands were an immediate threat to me. I knew my character kind of knew, Cyrus, the halfling or halfling rogue, that she might have some issues, but that's all I knew. I never had any issues with the Red Brand. I knew they were just some, thugs, pretty much. So that's what I thought.
Right. So I don't know if that could very well be on me in that I didn't stress the threat enough. However, I think you guys are getting to the point where you realize how severe the Red Brand threat is. Agreed. At this point. And especially during the day when everyone's off working in the mines or off manning their shops, there's not a lot of people around to defend, people that are manning shops or people that are snooping around. There's not a lot of guards around or people that are saying, hey, maybe you guys shouldn't do that. And they do kind of have a chokehold on this city in a way.
Yeah. It makes sense.
Yeah, and I think we knew that to some extent. Cyrus was trying to explain that to us. I don't know how much you need to stupid proof this and say, hey guys, maybe don't do that over and over again. I mean, that's not really, to a point it helps, but after a while we just sort of need to realize, hey, this is a only pseudo-friendly town to us, and in a lot of cases it's not at all. So maybe don't just go wandering, and I think, it's just something we need to be careful with that, I know Pittner was saying in the chat that we, aren't testing the intentions or really second guessing anything anybody's asking us to do, and that's also true. And I think that we this is kind of the first time we've been able to interact with somebody that we started this when we had a quest, and so you can't really avoid that because you have a quest, so we go do the quest. But now we're gaining the ability to take quests and maybe not taking the second step to say, does anybody know anything about this person? Do they seem trustworthy? Do they seem like they're trying to lead us into a trap? Do they have affiliations with the bad guys? And it's something I think that, we as players, and I guess then translating to our characters, we'll probably need to work on as we go forwards. Otherwise, we will just, be walking into problems over and over again.
Sure. So that leads me into a kind of an interesting point. How do you guys feel about in character or out? I don't care. How do you feel about the NPCs that have been laid out before you?
Hate them.
Hate them all.
One.
Way too vague. In what respect? In what building? I mean, we ran into.
Let's just talk about a few. Let's talk about Sildar. I think you guys have had a lot of interaction with Sildar, and I know we did touch on Sildar last episode, but I think that he's had a little more FaceTime this episode. And let's also talk about Sister Gareli, my personal favorite character to play, because I don't even have to know where I'm going with a sentence. I just start talking, and we'll see what happens. And then also Halia Thornton. Let's just get those three.
Varian and I, or Jeff and I, Varian and Sigurd, Jeff and I, didn't have a whole lot of direct interaction with Helia or Sildar in this past episode, but we're still watching. So I guess from a player perspective, I still like Sildar. My character got in pretty good with him at the first place. He's also offered up a ton of gold for us to go chase some things down, which never hurts for anybody.
Especially
Halia, I have not met directly yet.
True.
And as a character, and I don't know what to make of her yet. I feel like she and I are going to have a very interesting first interaction when we first run into each other, because I just don't get a great first impression off of her, not even having met her yet. And Sister Grayley just doesn't stop talking ever. I did help her a little bit in the temple, but holy cow! And she taught me a new spell, so that's cool. But holy cow, man! It's like 16-year-olds at the mall. I don't even know what to say about that one. So.
Yeah, as a player, I think coming from the player's standpoint, I think Sildar is the most developed personality that we have in form of NPCs. We know that what's her name likes to talk a lot. I mean, but outside of that, like in terms of just deep, like you can go a lot deeper into Sildar's personality from what we've experienced as a party so far, and really know more what kind of person he is and what his morals are, what his stand is on things, how he should react in terms of how we would expect him to react. At least we would have some idea. And in terms of the other NPCs, I don't think we have that yet, just because we don't have as much FaceTime with them so far. In terms of my character, the only interaction he's had is really with Sildar. Everyone else, my character just is itching to go save people and kill things, kill bad things. So
yeah,
that's pretty much it.
I really do like Sildar. I think he's a well-developed character. You've really seen him at his worst, and that really brings out a lot in a person. That they how they react when they're at their lowest. I think that's very telling. Do you guys want to talk about the quests or any of the items that you found? I know we're running, just a little long. If you guys want to touch on some things real quick, we can talk about that. If not, we can close it up.
I'm a big fan of Hypnotoad. Hypnotoad's pretty cool.
Hypnotoad's real sweet. I'm excited to see what the curse ends up doing to Kaylin. She discovered some things when she nat 20'd. We haven't gone over nat 20, nat 1 rolls yet.
I was thinking about doing that next week.
Natural 20, basically, it's a critical hit, and in a lot of skill checks, just really quickly, will gain you things like extra damage, more information. But we'll go over it a lot more in the next episode. Anyways, she rolled the best possible roll she could when she was investigating the toad in the first place, so she knows a lot about it that she hasn't been willing to share. But it would seem to me that if she's using it, she doesn't know everything about it. Because if it is truly cursed, I have to assume it has some negative effect to her that we're going to find out about. Plus, it's Hypnotoad, which we've been toying with the idea of just calling the D&D stream that, because it seems real good. But I don't know. I like Hypnotoad. Clark's Greatsword, I think, for Tanis is going to be... I love using the term broken, because, she's going to hit like a truck. Just seems real awesome. Haven't seen it in action yet, though, so, I guess we'll wait to see what happens with that.
I'm actually really interested to see if Tanis will use it.
We had a discussion off air afterwards, and she's super excited about the attack bonus and the amount of dice that are going to get flung when rocking that weapon. So I think we'll probably see it coming out more often than anything else she's carrying. So
the reason that I say that is, obviously you guys have seen her great connection to her great axe that she has. So I didn't know if she'd, and I like throwing that out there, like a tiny boost in damage and stats and just say, okay, you have a weapon that you have a deep connection to, versus, hey, this one is just a little better. What are you gonna do?
Her deep connection appears to be to javelin to the face.
I've noticed that a little.
Probably
Javelin to the neck.
Or javelin to the neck.
Shots.
Sorry, neck shot counter. Yeah, 4 out of 5 attacks from Tannis are javelin based, and I love the fact that in this game you can play a character that you would expect to be played a different way, completely different, and it becomes you. It becomes that. Tannis will be the javelin throwing fighter. Whereas, if I don't know, Varian was, the fighter with the great axe, then he might be the great axe fighter. It's cool to see the way that people play the characters.
Let me give you guys a little insight, because I am running 2 of this campaign simultaneously. So Jeff is playing the folk hero fighter, and I have another player, Kayland, who's playing the folk hero fighter. And Jeff, as Varian, has decided that he's playing it as a very ranged focused, pull out his greatsword only when he absolutely has to character. And Kayland is playing Salazar as a sword and shield fighter. Both started out exactly the same equipment, and they've gone 2 completely different paths. And it's exciting to see it.
Interesting. Yeah, as far as the quests go, we haven't really gone down those paths much yet. So I don't have much on that at this point, but I guess we'll see. I think next Monday is going to be real interesting as we have to decide which quest we want to do, and hopefully don't split the party again.
I think next Monday is going to be very interesting. As far as JCB9 is concerned, yes, D&D is Dungeons and Dragons, and we're talking about D&D 5e.
Supposedly I'm wearing a hillbilly hat, but I don't know what that means. I guess baseball hats are hillbilly hats now.
If you stick around and ask questions, we'd be glad to answer them. If you're gonna head out, that's cool too, man. It was great to have you here. Last thing I'm gonna kind of toss out. Speaking of quests, what are you guys leaning towards? You don't have to say too much, because I don't know if you guys want your characters to know what each other is thinking, but if you do, let's talk about it.
Yeah, I think the most apparent thing is the coloring book. Coloring book has to lead somewhere. We God,
you're gonna make me do something with this damn coloring book, aren't you?
I know
what the DM doesn't realize is the coloring book is actually the map that Gundren lost. Next time on D&D stream.
So our Sigurd Matt, he found a supposed ledger which turned out to be a children's coloring book in a house that we were investigating. And kept. He's cherishing it, and it's great. I still think there's some secret meaning behind there.
I'm heading back to the general store to see if they sell crayons. No, as far as the quests go, I don't really want to reveal where I'm going with this thing. I know that we may have other people on our stream that are going to listen to it, and I'd rather throw that surprise out there. Although, if you know my character, you probably know which thing I want to do. Because #family.
And that's fair. I'm just, the reason that I'm kind of curious is that, there's certainly a definite threat where you are now, and I'm wondering if you guys will pursue that or decide to leave that threat to kind of take care of itself. And I think that kind of comes down to the types of characters and how intense things get as you progress forward.
Sure.
Also, price of crayons, at least 3 pence. I can't think of any lower.
I'm going to need multiple sets.
What?
I'm going to need multiple sets. I will empty my bank account.
Perfect. One more thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about. This is strictly at a player level and not a character level. How do you feel about the fact that Tanis is carrying around a large amount of gold, which is intended for you, but hasn't talked about it at all?
Yeah, player wise, I feel like she misunderstood and thinks it's all hers. I don't know if her character is knowingly hiding this money. I know I tried to figure that out in game. It didn't really work out, but I'm not sure if she knows or not. But if she does, that mean person.
I'm willing to bet that it'll resolve itself when we go find Sildar and ask about our payment, and things will get cleared up real quick. But no, I do think that either she hasn't found a good time to bring it up because we did all kind of coalesce back together and rush into the end and close the stream because we were towards the end, or may have misinterpreted. Not, I think there just hasn't been an opportune moment. We're in the middle of a fight. You're not going to be doling out pence, to everybody as you're getting shot at, kind of deal. So
you can for sure bet I'm gonna be rolling a investigation check or perception check on that loud jingling in her backpack that I hear every time she takes a step.
Sure, absolutely. Well, that's all I've got, guys. If you guys don't have anything else, I think we can kind of roll it out. I think we had a good discussion tonight.
Yeah, Matt, you got anything else?
Stay tuned next week for the antics of the coloring book. We stream 7 to 10 ish Monday nights Central, and this will be 8 to 9 something on Tuesdays.
Yep. Yeah, I would say that D&D stream is a lot more like 7 to 10:30 Central. But yeah, come hang out. It'll be a good time.
Yeah, don't forget to check us out on Facebook at Starting Equipment, Twitter at Starting Equip, shortened equipment. You can figure that out. What else are we on, guys?
Check out the Facebook page, Starting Equipment. We post on both Facebook and Twitter every time we are starting up a stream for both this show and for our D&D stream. So if you follow both, you'll see when we're going live on either. And
sure, yeah.
That should be it.
Yep. Don't forget to follow the stream. You'll get instant notifications every time we go live.
We do also record all these videos and upload them to YouTube. And the YouTube channel, Jeff, is what?
YouTube channel is youtube.com/tumtumgg. My username you can see on the screen. Same as my Twitter handle. We also post on Facebook links to the uploads of our videos. So give us a follow on Facebook and you will be able to get a direct link to our videos on there. On that note, thanks for hanging out with us on our first official episode of Starting Equipment. We've had a few test equipments, so we're just three nerds. We pretend to know what we're talking about, and even sometimes we make sense. Join us next week, and we'll see you later.